Everyone thinks revenge begins the moment your heart breaks. Mine didn't. Mine began the day I smiled and pretended I believed every single lie he told me. If you had seen us together, you would have called us the perfect couple. He held my hand in public, spoke about our future, and looked at me like I was the only person in the world. But behind my back, he was building a completely different life. The strange part wasn't that he betrayed me. The strange part was that he believed I would never find out. The day I discovered his secret, I had two choices. I could cry, scream, and walk away, giving him exactly what he expected. Or I could stay quiet, so I chose silence. I let him believe he had won. I laughed at his jokes. I accepted his fake apologies. I even thanked him for things that meant nothing anymore. Every smile I gave him made him feel safer. Every day he became more confident. He had no idea that I wasn't forgiving him. I was watching him, waiting, collecting every lie, every message, every promise he broke. He thought he was writing the ending of my story. He never realized he was writing his own. And when the truth finally came out, he didn't lose because I shouted. He lost because I stayed silent long enough for everyone to see who he really was. That was the day he finally understood one painful truth. Sometimes the quietest revenge leaves the deepest mark. There was a time when I believed life had finally given me everything I had ever prayed for. His name was Ethan. We met on a rainy afternoon at a small neighborhood coffee shop. I was rushing to finish some work before a deadline, and he accidentally spilled a little coffee on my notebook. He looked so embarrassed that I couldn't help laughing. Instead of making excuses, he bought me another drink and stayed to help me rewrite the notes that had been ruined. That simple accident turned into a 3-hour conversation. We talked about family, dreams, childhood memories, and all the little things that usually take months to share with someone. By the time I walked out of that cafe, I felt like I had known him for years. Over the next few months, Ethan became the person I trusted more than anyone. Every morning started with a sweet message from him. Every evening ended with a phone call. He never forgot my birthday, remembered my favorite food, and somehow always knew when I had a difficult day before I even told him. For the first time in a long time, I felt safe. My friends adored him. My parents respected him. Even my younger sister joked that she had never seen me smile so much. I wasn't just in love. I believed I had found my forever. One evening, we drove to a quiet hill outside the city to watch the sunset. The sky was painted with soft shades of orange and pink as we sat on the hood of his car, sharing a box of fries and laughing over old stories. "I want this forever," he whispered. I smiled and squeezed his hand. "So do I." In that moment, I believed every word. A few months later, we rented a small apartment together. It wasn't fancy. The kitchen was tiny. The bedroom walls needed fresh paint, and the old heater made strange noises every winter night. But to us, it was perfect. We spent weekends decorating every corner together. We argued about where the couch should go. We laughed when we burned our first homemade pizza. We celebrated tiny victories, like buying our first dining table or hanging pictures on the walls. Those little moments meant more to me than expensive gifts ever could. Money wasn't always easy. Sometimes we had to cancel weekend trips because one of us had unexpected bills. Sometimes dinner was just instant noodles while we joked about becoming rich one day. Yet I never complained, because I believed love wasn't measured by luxury, it was measured by loyalty. Or at least, that's what I thought. Ethan often told me how lucky he was to have someone who believed in him. "I don't know what I'd do without you," he'd say. And every time he said those words, I believed them with all my heart. When he decided to start his own business, I became his biggest supporter. I worked extra hours to help with our expenses while he chased his dream. I encouraged him whenever he felt like giving up. I even used part of my savings to help him buy the equipment he needed. He promised me it was only temporary. "One day," he said, "everything I build will belong to both of us." Those words filled me with hope. Months passed, and slowly his business began to grow. More customers arrived. More money came in. Life became easier. We celebrated every small success together. I thought we were building a future side by side. But looking back now, something else was growing at the same time. Not love, not trust. Afterwards, tiny changes started to appear, so small that anyone else would have ignored them. He smiled at his phone more often. He stayed late at work. Sometimes he stepped outside to answer calls. Whenever I asked if everything was okay, he would smile, kiss my forehead and say, "You're overthinking again." And because I loved him, I believed him. I had no idea those small moments were the beginning of a story that would change my life forever. The happiest chapter of my life was quietly coming to an end. I just didn't know it yet. Looking back, I realized betrayal never arrives all at once. It starts with little changes, changes that seem too small to question. At first, Ethan stopped calling me during his lunch breaks. He said work had become too busy. His business was growing faster than either of us expected, so I didn't think much of it. "Things will calm down soon," he would say with a tired smile. I believed him. Then our evenings changed. We used to cook dinner together, laugh over silly videos, and talk about our day until midnight. Now he came home late, sometimes after 10, sometimes after 11. He always had a reason, a meeting, a new client, an emergency at work. Every excuse sounded believable. And because I trusted him, I never questioned it. One Friday night, I surprised him by bringing dinner to his office. I thought we'd eat together and drive home. But when I got there, the lights were off. The receptionist looked confused when I asked for Ethan. "He left almost 2 hours ago," she said. For a moment, I thought maybe she had the wrong day. I smiled politely and thanked her, pretending nothing was wrong. On the drive home, I kept telling myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe he met a client somewhere else. Maybe his phone battery died. Maybe there were always maybes. When he finally walked through the front door that night, he looked completely relaxed. "I've had the longest meeting," he sighed. I stared at him for a second. The lie was so natural, so effortless. For the first time, something inside me whispered, "He's hiding something." But I ignored that voice, because accepting the truth felt more painful than believing another excuse. The next few weeks became stranger. His phone never left his hand. If it buzzed, he turned the screen away from me. If I entered the room unexpectedly, he quickly locked it. One evening, while we were watching a movie, his phone lit up on the table. A message appeared for just a second. "I already miss you." The sender's name wasn't saved, just a heart emoji. Before I could read anything else, Ethan grabbed the phone. "Oh, that's just spam," he laughed. "Spam? Who sends spam with a heart?" I wanted to ask. Instead, I stayed quiet that night. I barely slept. Questions filled my mind. Was I imagining things? Was I becoming insecure? Or was my heart trying to warn me before my mind was ready to listen? The next morning, I decided to trust him one more time. Love makes you do that. It convinces you that doubt is the enemy. But sometimes, blind trust is. Days turned into weeks. The distance between us grew. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped noticing when I was upset. Even when we sat in the same room, it felt like we were living in different worlds. One Sunday, we were supposed to visit my parents for dinner. An hour before leaving, he got another phone call. "I have to deal with a business problem," he said. "I'll come later." He never came. My mother tried to hide her disappointment. My father quietly changed the subject. On the drive back home, I kept defending Ethan. "He's just busy. He didn't mean to hurt anyone. He'll make it up to us." Those words weren't for them. They were for me. I needed to believe them. A few days later, my best friend Mia asked me a question that caught me completely off guard. "Are you two okay?" I forced a smile. "Of course." She hesitated before speaking again. "I've seen Ethan twice this week." My heart skipped a beat. "Oh, he wasn't alone." The world suddenly felt quieter. "What do you mean?" Mia looked uncomfortable. I could be wrong, but he was having dinner with the same woman both times. I laughed, not because it was funny, because I refused to believe it. Probably a client. I hope so, Mia said softly, but it didn't look like a business meeting. For the rest of the day, her words echoed inside my head. I wanted to call Ethan. I wanted to demand answers. Instead, I remembered something. The man I loved had never admitted a mistake unless he had no other choice. If I confronted him without proof, he'd simply tell another convincing story, and I'd probably believe him again. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't accuse him. I wouldn't argue. I wouldn't cry. Not yet. If there was a truth hiding behind his perfect smile, I was going to find it myself, because deep inside, my heart already knew something my mind was still afraid to accept. The man I had trusted with my future was becoming a stranger, and strangers are capable of secrets you never see coming. I still hoped I was wrong, but hope was beginning to lose its battle against the truth. After my conversation with Mia, I stopped looking for excuses. Instead, I started looking for the truth. I didn't become someone I wasn't. I wasn't trying to spy on Ethan or control his life. I simply wanted one honest answer. If he loved someone else, I deserved to know. If I was wrong, I wanted to apologize for doubting him. But something inside me kept saying, keep looking. The next week, Ethan became even more distant. He smiled less. He talked less. Whenever I asked about his day, his answers were shorter than ever. Busy, fine, nothing special. The man who once shared every little detail with me suddenly had nothing to say. One Thursday evening, he walked into the apartment looking unusually happy. I have great news, he said. A big investor wants to work with us. I'll probably be traveling more over the next few weeks. I hugged him and congratulated him. He smiled back, but for some reason, his smile didn't reach his eyes. The following Saturday, he packed a small travel bag. I'll be back tomorrow night, he said as he kissed my forehead. I'll miss you. I'll miss you too, I replied. I stood by the window and watched his car disappear down the street. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Mia. Are you home? Yes, I think I just saw Ethan. I frowned. That's impossible. He left for another city. There was a long pause. No, I'm looking right at him. My heart began to race. Where are you? She told me the name of a small shopping district across town. Without thinking, I grabbed my keys and drove there. The entire drive, I kept telling myself there had to be a simple explanation. Maybe his trip had been canceled. Maybe he stopped for coffee, maybe. When I arrived, I spotted his car almost immediately. It was parked outside a quiet restaurant. I stayed inside my own car, trying to calm my breathing. A few minutes later, the restaurant door opened. Ethan walked out. He wasn't alone. A woman about my age walked beside him. She was laughing. He reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned her head gently against his shoulder. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. It felt like the world had gone silent. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was simply numb. The man who had promised me forever looked happier with someone else than he had looked with me in months. I wanted to get out of the car. I wanted to ask him one question, why? But something stopped me. If I confronted him now, he would only deny it. He would tell another story, and somehow he always knew exactly what to say. So I stayed hidden. A few months later, they walked toward a jewelry store. I watched through the glass windows as Ethan pointed toward a display case. The woman smiled brightly. The employee brought out several rings. Rings, my heart sank. Just 6 months earlier, Ethan and I had stood in another jewelry store, talking about the kind of engagement ring we both liked. He had promised, when the time is right, I'll surprise you. Now, it looked like he was planning that surprise for someone else. Tears filled my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Not there. Not because of him. I quietly drove home before they could see me. That night, Ethan returned to the apartment exactly as he promised. He acted tired. The meeting went well, he said while taking off his jacket. I looked into his eyes. The lie came so easily. "So how was your trip?" I asked calmly. "It was exhausting," he replied, "but worth it." I nodded. "I hope everything works out." He smiled. "It will." He had no idea I already knew. That night, while he slept peacefully beside me, I stared at the ceiling until sunrise. Every memory replayed inside my mind. Our first date, our first apartment, every promise, every dream, every "I love you." None of them felt real anymore. The next morning, Ethan left early for work. For the first time in years, he forgot his laptop. It was sitting on the dining table. Normally, I would have called him immediately. Instead, I simply looked at it. My heart was pounding. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for the truth. After several minutes, I finally opened it. He had never changed the password. The screen unlocked instantly. At first, everything looked normal. Business files, invoices, AMs. Then I noticed a folder with an ordinary name, Project Future. Curious, I opened it. It wasn't a business project. Inside were hotel reservations, travel plans, photos, and dozens of documents. One file caught my attention. It was titled New Beginning. My hands trembled as I clicked it. The document contained a detailed financial plan: sell the apartment, transfer savings, move to another city. Start over. Every step had been carefully planned, but the most painful part wasn't the plan. It was the first sentence. "Once everything is finalized, Emily won't know until it's too late." Emily. My name. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't confusion. This wasn't someone making a bad decision. This had been planned for months. He wasn't just leaving me. He was planning to leave with the money we had built together, the savings I had helped create, the future we had dreamed about. I closed the laptop and sat in complete silence. No tears came this time, only clarity. For weeks I had been asking myself one question: does he still love me? Now I finally had my answer. No, the man I loved had already chosen his future. He just hadn't told me yet. As painful as that truth was, it also gave me something I hadn't had in weeks: a clear mind. The woman who cried over his lies disappeared that morning. In her place stood someone else. Someone who finally understood that trust had been broken beyond repair. And if Ethan believed I would quietly disappear while he walked away with everything, he was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Because from that moment on, I stopped trying to save the relationship. The morning after I discovered the files on Ethan's laptop, I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were red from another sleepless night. For a moment, I didn't recognize the woman staring back at me. She looked tired, heartbroken, lost. But behind all that pain, something new had appeared: determination. I wiped my face, took a deep breath, and made myself one promise. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to scream. And I definitely wasn't going to let Ethan know that I had discovered everything. If he thought I was still living inside his lies, that was exactly where I wanted him to believe I was. When he came home that evening, I greeted him with the same smile I had worn for years. "How was work?" I asked. He smiled back. "Busy, but good." He hugged me like nothing had changed, like he hadn't been planning to walk away with my future. For the first time, I hugged him back without feeling anything. It wasn't love anymore. It was goodbye. Over the next few days, I became the person he expected me to be. I laughed at his jokes. I made his favorite dinners. I even wished him luck before every business meeting. Every time I acted normal, he became more relaxed. He believed his secret was safe. That was his biggest mistake. Meanwhile, I quietly began putting the pieces together. I met with an accountant who had helped us when Ethan first started his business. Without mentioning the betrayal, I simply asked to review all of our shared financial records. The accountant was surprised. "I thought Ethan handled all of this now." "I just want to understand everything," I replied with a smile. When I went through the paperwork, the truth became even clearer. Several large transfers had been made over the last 6 months. Money had slowly disappeared from our shared savings. Not enough to make me notice all at once, but enough to build a completely different future. A future without me. I copied every document, every receipt, every bank statement. Then I placed them in a folder at my office, far away from our apartment. If Ethan searched the house, he'd find nothing. Next, I reached out to someone I hadn't spoken to in years, his business partner, Daniel. We met at a quiet cafe. Daniel looked confused. "I thought Ethan would be with you." I smiled politely. "Actually, I just wanted to ask you a few questions." Within minutes, I realized Daniel knew nothing about Ethan's plans. In fact, Daniel believed Ethan was fully committed to expanding the business where they were. When I carefully mentioned the possibility of moving to another city, Daniel frowned. "What are you talking about?" I watched the confusion on his face. "You didn't know?" He slowly shook his head. That told me everything. Ethan wasn't just lying to me. He was lying to everyone. As the days passed, I kept collecting small pieces of the puzzle. A hotel booking, private emails, business messages, even a rental agreement in another city. Every clue pointed to the same ending. He planned to disappear quietly, leave me with questions, and start a new life as if I had never existed. But one thing in his plan never changed. He believed I was completely unaware. One evening, while we ate dinner together, he smiled across the table. "You've been amazing lately." I looked at him. "What do you mean? You haven't complained about how busy I've been." I almost laughed. "Instead," I calmly replied, "I trust you." Those 3 words made him smile with relief. If only he knew. Trust was the one thing that no longer existed. A week later, Ethan announced some exciting news. "My company is hosting a celebration next Friday. A lot of clients and investors will be there. You should come." I looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "Of course," he said. "It'll be fun." The invitation confused me at first. Why would he invite me if he planned to leave? Then I realized something. He wanted everyone to believe our relationship was perfect. It was part of his image. The successful businessman, the happy partner, the perfect future. He had spent months creating that picture. And I was about to show everyone what was hiding behind it. That night, I opened the folder containing every document I had collected. I spread everything across my desk. Bank records, travel bookings, moms. The file called New Beginning. Every page told the same story. Every lie had left a trail. I wasn't looking for revenge anymore. I was looking for justice. There is a difference. Revenge is driven by anger. Justice is driven by truth. I wanted the truth to speak louder than my emotions ever could. So instead of making a scene, I made a plan. I organized every document in perfect order. I saved digital copies on a secure drive. I printed backups. Then I wrote one short sentence on the first page. The truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. As I closed the folder, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "Love you. Thanks for always believing in me." I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I replied with only 3 words. "See you Friday." He thought Friday would be another celebration, another night where everyone admired him, another step toward the future he had secretly planned. He had no idea. Friday would become the day every lie he had carefully built would begin to fall apart. And this time, I wasn't going to stop it. Friday finally arrived. As Ethan and I walked into the company celebration, everyone greeted him with smiles and applause. Investors congratulated him. Employees thanked him. Friends admired how quickly he had built a successful business. Standing beside him, I looked like the proud partner who had supported him from the beginning. And in many ways, the difference was, I now knew the truth. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped onto the stage to give his speech. He thanked his team, his clients, and then turned toward me with a warm smile. "And most importantly," he said, "I'd like to thank Emily. She believed in me before anyone else." The audience applauded. I smiled back. Then, as he finished, I slowly stood from my seat. "I'd like to say a few words, too." Ethan nodded confidently, certain I was about to praise him. I walked onto the stage, took the microphone, and looked around the silent room. I've always believed that trust is the foundation of every relationship, I began. That's why I supported Ethan with my time, my save, and my heart. I paused, then held up a folder. But real trust cannot survive hidden plans. The room grew quiet. Inside the folder were copies of bank records, travel bookings, and one document that changed everything. I didn't need to read every page. I simply showed the first sentence. Once everything is finalized, Emily won't know until it's too late. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Faces that had been smiling moments earlier were now filled with disbelief. Ethan's expression changed instantly. "Emily, please, let me explain." I calmly shook my head. "You've had months to tell the truth. Tonight, I'm simply letting everyone see it." I placed the folder on the table and stepped away from the microphone. There was no shouting, no dramatic argument. The silence in that room was louder than any accusation I could have made. For the first time, people weren't listening to Ethan's promises. They were looking at the evidence. As I walked toward the exit, no one tried to stop me. Behind me, Ethan remained frozen on the stage, surrounded by the same people who had admired him only minutes before. He thought he had won by hiding the truth. But in the end, the truth found him before he could escape it. And that was the moment he realized that a carefully built lie can fall apart in just a few honest words.